I never thought Mark would find out about Adrian, but when he did, his revenge was ice cold. "You ruined us," he spat, his eyes burning with fury. I tried to explain, but deep down I knew I was trapped. When I first crossed the line with my boss, I never imagined it would set off a chain of events that would tear apart my life. How far would you go if someone betrayed your trust? My husband's revenge was more devastating than I ever imagined. Let me take you through a story of betrayal, passion, and consequences. Don't forget to subscribe for more compelling stories, and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I'll now begin the first 1,000 words of the story. Stay tuned. The office was quiet for once, the kind of calm that only came late at night when the usual buzz of voices and ringing phones faded. I stared at the pile of legal briefs on my desk, pretending to focus, but my thoughts were scattered. Adrian, my boss, had left his office door slightly ajar, and every so often I caught a glimpse of him pacing, running his hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. Adrian was everything Mark wasn't. He was sharp, decisive, and had a way of commanding a room that left everyone else feeling small. Mark, my husband, was steady, reliable, and kind, qualities that used to make me feel safe. Lately, though, that safety had begun to feel like suffocation. It wasn't Mark's fault, he was a good man, but somewhere along the way I had started craving more. "Late night again, Rachel?" Adrian's voice broke through my thoughts. I looked up, startled to find him standing at the edge of my desk. His tie was loosened, and the faint shadow of stubble lined his jaw. The sight of him this unguarded sent a thrill through me that I quickly tried to suppress. "Just trying to wrap up the Miller case," I said, forcing a casual tone. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made my stomach flutter. "You've been doing excellent work lately. I've noticed." The warmth in his voice felt like a spotlight, and I couldn't help but bask in it. For months, I had been feeling invisible at home, my accomplishments brushed off as routine by Mark, who was often too preoccupied with his own struggles at work. But here was Adrian, noticing me, appreciating me, in a way that felt intoxicating. "You've set a high standard around here," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Why don't you take a break? Join me for a drink in my office," he suggested, gesturing toward the door. Every rational part of me screamed to decline. This was crossing a line, and I knew it, but there was something in the way he looked at me, something that made it impossible to say no. "Just one drink," I said, standing and smoothing my skirt. Adrian's office was dimly lit, the soft glow of a desk lamp casting shadows across the room. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to me, his fingers brushing mine in the process. "To hard work," he said, raising his glass. "A teamwork," I replied, taking a sip. The whiskey burned my throat, but it was nothing compared to the heat in the air between us. We talked about work, about life, and as the minutes ticked by, the conversation grew more personal. Adrian leaned against his desk, his eyes locked on mine, and I felt a pull I couldn't resist. "You're remarkable, Rachel," he said softly, his voice low and sincere. "I don't know what this firm would do without you." The words felt like a lifeline, a validation I hadn't realized I was so desperate for. Before I knew what was happening, Adrian closed the distance between us, his hand brushing my cheek. "This is a mistake," I whispered, but I didn't step back. "Sometimes mistakes lead to the best moments," he replied, and then his lips were on mine. The kiss was electric, a jolt of energy that made me forget everything. Mark, my marriage, the consequences. In that moment, there was only Adrian, only the way his touch made me feel alive, for the first time in years. When I finally pulled away, reality came crashing back. "I should go," I said, my voice shaking. Adrian didn't argue, but his eyes held a promise, a challenge. "Think about what you want, Rachel. Not what's right, what you want." As I walked out of his office, my heart pounding, I knew I had just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. What I didn't know was how far the consequences would ripple, or how much Mark would make me pay for this moment of weakness. The drive home was silent except for the rhythmic hum of the engine. My mind raced with thoughts of what had just happened in Adrian's office. The kiss replayed in my head like a scene from a movie I couldn't turn off. I kept telling myself it was just a momentary lapse in judgment, something I could bury and forget. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. When I pulled into the driveway, the sight of Mark's car parked neatly in its usual spot sent a pang of guilt through me. Mark had texted earlier asking if I wanted takeout, and I'd replied with a short, "No, I'll eat at work." It wasn't entirely a lie. I'd skipped dinner, though not because of work. I stepped inside and was greeted by the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. Mark was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up and smiled, the kind of easy, genuine smile that had once made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. "Hey, you're home late," he said, standing to greet me. "Rough day?" "Just busy," I replied, avoiding his eyes as I set my bag down. He stepped closer, placing his hands gently on my shoulders. "You look exhausted. Let me get you some tea." "No, it's fine," I said, brushing past him. "I just need a shower and some sleep." I could feel his eyes on me as I climbed the stairs, but I didn't turn around. Mark had always been attentive, but lately his care felt like an obligation rather than affection. Or maybe it was me who had changed, projecting my own restlessness onto him. As the hot water poured over me in the shower, I closed my eyes, trying to wash away the lingering sensation of Adrian's lips on mine. But it wouldn't go away. I hated how easily I had been drawn in, how effortlessly Adrian had dismantled the walls I had spent years building. Back in the bedroom, I found Mark already in bed, reading a book. I slid under the covers, careful to stay on my side, and turned off the light. "Good night," Mark said, his voice soft. "Good night," I replied, though my thoughts were a million miles away. The next morning, the weight of my actions settled heavily on me. I went through the motions of getting ready, avoiding Mark's questions about my plans for the day. At work, things were different. Adrian acted as though nothing had happened, and for a moment, I wondered if I had imagined it all. But then his eyes met mine during a meeting, and the way they lingered told me it had been very real. As the days passed, I fell into a dangerous routine. Adrian and I didn't talk about the kiss, but the tension between us grew stronger. He found reasons to keep me late at work, subtle excuses that always seemed justifiable. One night, as I worked late again, Adrian appeared at my desk with 2 cups of coffee. "You need to stop working so hard," he said, placing 1 cup in front of me. I laughed softly. "You're the one who gives me all this work." He smirked, leaning against the edge of my desk. "Guilty as charged. But I wouldn't give it to you if I didn't think you could handle it." His words were flattering, but there was something in his tone that made me uneasy. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "Rachel," he said, his voice low, "you deserve more than this. More than late nights and unappreciative people." I knew he wasn't just talking about work. "I should get back to this," I said, trying to deflect. But he didn't move. Instead, he leaned in, his lips so close to mine I could feel his breath. "Tell me you don't feel it too," he whispered. I wanted to deny it, to push him away and end whatever this was before it went any further, but instead, I found myself whispering back, "I don't know what I feel anymore." That night as I drove home, guilt consumed me. I hated myself for letting things go this far, for risking everything I had built with Mark for something so fleeting. But the truth was, Adrian made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Mark was waiting for me when I got home. He had cooked dinner, a rare gesture that should have warmed my heart. Instead, it made me feel like a fraud. I looked down, pretending to sift through papers. Adrian, we shouldn't be doing this. I don't know what this is, but it's wrong. It doesn't feel wrong, he said, his voice steady. You deserve to feel wanted, Rachel. You deserve someone who sees you. His words hit harder than I wanted to admit. For so long I had felt invisible in my marriage, my needs buried under Mark's own struggles. Adrian's attention felt like a lifeline, a chance to reclaim something I thought I'd lost. But as much as I tried to justify it, I couldn't shake the guilt. I knew I was playing with fire. What I didn't know was that Mark had already noticed the smoke. When I arrived home that night, the house was eerily quiet. Mark's car was in the driveway, but the lights inside were dim. I walked into the living room to find him sitting on the couch, his laptop open on the coffee table. He didn't look. Hey, I said cautiously. You're home early. I thought we should talk, he replied, his tone flat. A chill ran down my spine. About what? Mark turned the laptop toward me, and my heart stopped. On the screen was a series of messages. My messages. Somehow he had gained access to my phone's cloud account, and the evidence of my affair with Adrian was laid out in black and white. Mark, I can explain, I stammered, my mind racing for an excuse, a justification. And don't, he said sharply, standing up. Don't insult me by pretending there's an explanation for this. I tried to reach for his hand, but he stepped back. The look in his eyes was something I'd never seen before. Anger, hurt, betrayal, all mixed into one. How long, he demanded, how long have you been sneaking around with him? It wasn't like that, I said, tears streaming down my face. It just happened. Don't give me that it just happened crap, Rachel, he shouted, his voice cracking. You made a choice. You chose him over me, over us. I couldn't argue, he was right. For the next few days, Mark barely spoke to me. The silence was suffocating. I tried to apologize, to explain, but he refused to listen. Then one evening, he came home and handed me a stack of papers. What's this? I asked, my hands trembling as I flipped through them. Divorce papers, he said, his voice cold. You've already destroyed our marriage. I'm just making it official. Mark, please, I begged, my chest tightening. We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. He laughed bitterly. Fix it? Rachel, you cheated on me. You betrayed me in the worst way possible. There's no fixing this. But I love you, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Mark's eyes softened for a moment, but then the hardness returned. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry, not just for what I did, but for all the ways I let us drift apart. You gave me so much, and I failed to appreciate it. I let my own insecurities blind me to the love you offered so freely, and for that, I don't expect your forgiveness, and I don't deserve it. But I hope that someday you'll remember the good times we shared and know that they were real. Thank you for everything, Mark. I hope Claire gives you the happiness I couldn't. Sincerely, Rachel. I never sent the letter. It wasn't for Mark. It was for me. A way to let go, to acknowledge my mistakes and begin to move forward. For the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let my past define me. It had been nearly a year since Mark and I had last spoken. The divorce was finalized, and life had settled into an odd rhythm. I still worked at the firm, though my role had become quieter, almost invisible. People didn't invite me to lunches or team outings anymore, but I had learned to embrace the solitude. It gave me time to reflect and focus on rebuilding my life. Take care. I stared at the screen, and in the quiet moments, when I thought of Mark, it was no longer with regret or longing, it was with gratitude. for the love we had shared, and for the lessons it had taught me. The day of the art exhibit was more than just a personal milestone. It was a celebration of everything I had endured, survived, and transformed. The gallery was small, but filled with warmth and light, the walls adorned with pieces that told stories of pain, joy, and growth. My painting hung on the far wall, a burst of bold colors that mirrored the emotional chaos I had been through. As the evening unfolded, I found myself surrounded by strangers, each offering kind words about my work. Their praise wasn't what struck me, though. It was the realization that I had found my voice again. For so long, I had let my life revolve around others, losing sight of who I was. Toward the end of the night, as I stood by the refreshment table, a man approached me. He was tall and lean, with a soft smile that felt disarming. "Your piece is incredible," he said, gesturing toward my painting. "It's raw and honest. It's brave." I smiled, feeling a twinge of warmth. "Thank you. It's the first thing I've painted in years." "Well, you've got a gift. I'm Liam, by the way." He extended his hand and I shook it, noting the kindness in his eyes. "Rachel," I replied. We talked for a while about art, life, and everything in between. Liam was an architect, someone who also found meaning in creating. There was an ease in our conversation, a lightness I hadn't felt in ages. He didn't ask about my past, and I didn't offer. For the first time, I was content to simply be in the moment. Over the following weeks, Liam and I began to see each other more often. It wasn't romantic, not at first. It was a friendship built on shared passions and mutual respect. He'd visit my apartment to see what I was working on, and I'd listen as he described his latest projects. But as time passed, something shifted. One evening, after he helped me hang a new painting in my living room, I caught him watching me with a look I hadn't seen in a long time. It wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, something I wasn't sure I deserved. "Rachel," he said softly, "do you ever think about starting over?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond. Starting over how? Liam and I eventually moved in together, merging our lives in a way that felt natural and right. Our home was a blend of our passions, his clean, minimalist design and my bursts of color and creativity. It was a space that reflected not just who we were as individuals, but who we were together. One evening, as we sat on the couch planning a trip to Europe, Liam turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about what's next?" he asked. I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Marriage, maybe. A family. Whatever the future looks like for us." The question caught me off guard, not because I hadn't thought about it, but because I wasn't sure I deserved it. My first marriage had ended in disaster, and part of me wondered if I was capable of building something lasting. But as I looked at Liam, his eyes filled with love and patience, I realized that I wasn't the same person I had been back then. I had grown, I had learned, and most importantly, "I think I'm ready to find out," I said, taking his hand. The journey to that moment hadn't been easy. It had been filled with heartbreak, mistakes, and hard lessons. But it had also been filled with growth, resilience, and redemption. I had learned to forgive myself, to embrace the messy, imperfect parts of life, and to believe in second chances. And as I stood on the brink of a new chapter, I knew that my story was far from over. It was just beginning. A year after Liam and I moved in together, life felt like it had settled into something I hadn't experienced in years. Balance. The chaos of my past had given way to a quiet stability, and for the first time, I felt like I was building a life I truly wanted. We spent our days pursuing our passions, Liam with his architectural designs and me with my art. Our home had become a sanctuary, filled with sunlight streaming through large windows and walls adorned with my paintings. It was a place where we could simply be, without the weight of old mistakes hanging over us. One afternoon, while cleaning out a closet, I came across a dusty journal I hadn't seen in years. Flipping through its pages, I found entries from a time when my life was at its most turbulent. The words were raw and painful, detailing the emotional fallout of my affair, the collapse of my marriage, and the loneliness that followed. But as I read further, I saw glimpses of hope, small moments of clarity where I had started to see the path forward. There was an entry about the first painting I completed after Mark left, a scribbled note about a conversation with Mia that had inspired me, and even a tentative list of goals I wanted to achieve. By the time I closed the journal, I realized just how far I had come. The person who had written those words felt like a stranger, but also like a part of me that I had finally made peace with. Later that evening, as Liam and I prepared dinner together, I shared the discovery with him. "I found my old journal," I said, slicing vegetables as he stirred a pot of sauce. "It's strange reading back through it. It's like looking at a different version of myself." Liam paused, turning to face me. "What did it make you feel?" I thought for a moment before answering. "Grateful for how much I've grown, and for you for being part of this new chapter." He smiled, his hand reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "I'm grateful for you too, Rachel. You're one of the strongest people I know." As life moved forward, opportunities continued to present themselves. The traveling art exhibit featuring my work received glowing reviews, and I was approached by a publishing house to create a coffee table book showcasing my paintings. The idea thrilled me, not just because of the exposure, but because it felt like a way to tell my story through my art. The book, titled Colors of Redemption, was a collection of pieces that spanned the years of my journey. Each painting was accompanied by a short essay, reflecting on the emotions and experiences that had inspired it. Writing those essays was as cathartic as painting the pieces themselves, and by the time the book was published, I felt like I had left a tangible mark on the world. One of the most memorable nights of my life came at the book launch. The event was held in a beautifully restored warehouse, the walls lined with my artwork and large posters of the book's cover. Friends, colleagues, and strangers filled the space, mingling as soft music played in the background. As I stood at the podium to give a short speech, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. Looking out at the crowd, I spotted Liam, Mia, and even some of my former coworkers who had come to show their support. For a moment, I hesitated, unsure if I could find the words to express what this moment meant to me. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "This book is more than just a collection of art. It's a testament to the power of second chances, the importance of self-reflection, and the beauty that can come from even the darkest times." I paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "There was a time when I didn't think I could come back from my mistakes. But I've learned that it's not the mistakes that define us. It's what we do afterward. It's the choice to grow, to heal, and to keep moving forward." The applause that followed was overwhelming, and as I stepped down from the podium, Liam was there to wrap me in a tight embrace. "You are amazing," he whispered, his voice filled with pride. As we exchanged rings and shared our first kiss as husband and wife, I knew that this was the life I may have sent them some of your work," Liam admitted, his grin widening. "I thought it was time the world saw more of what you can do." Tears filled my eyes as I wrapped my arms around him. "You're always pushing me to be better." "I don't deserve you." "You deserve everything, Rachel," he said, kissing the top of my head, "and I'll always remind you of that." The retreat in Tuscany was life-changing, surrounded by rolling hills, golden sunsets, and the camaraderie of other artists. I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The days were filled with workshops and plein air painting sessions, while the evenings were spent sharing meals and stories under the stars. One night, as I sat by the fire with a group of fellow artists, we began to share what had brought us to this place. When it was my turn, I hesitated. I had never been one to openly discuss my past, especially with strangers, but something about the warmth of the group gave me the courage to speak. I used to think my mistakes defined me, I began, my voice steady despite the emotion swirling inside. But I've learned that they're just part of my story. Art helped me see that even the messiest parts of life can become something beautiful if you're willing to look at them differently. The group listened intently, their faces reflecting a mix of empathy and understanding. By the time I finished, I felt lighter, as if I had shed a piece of the weight I still carried. When I returned home, I was greeted by Liam's warm embrace and the familiar comfort of our shared life. But there was something else waiting for me. A letter from Mark. I stared at the envelope for a long time, unsure if I wanted to open it. My life with Mark felt like a distant memory, a chapter that had been closed long ago. But curiosity got the better of me, and I finally tore it open. Dear Rachel, I hope this letter finds you well. I've thought about writing to you many times, but I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. Seeing your art in a gallery a few months ago reminded me of how much you've grown, and I just wanted to say how proud I am. I don't hold on to anger anymore. I've found peace, and I hope you have too. Life has a way of teaching us lessons in the most painful ways, but I believe those lessons make us better. Thank you for the good times we shared, and for teaching me to value myself enough to move forward. I wish you nothing but happiness. Take care. Bye. I folded the letter carefully, a bittersweet smile playing on my lips. It was a reminder of how far we had both come, and it filled me with gratitude for the paths we had chosen. As time went on, my art career continued to flourish. Galleries around the world began showcasing my work, and I found myself invited to speak at events I once would have been too afraid to attend. My book, Colors of Redemption, was translated into multiple languages, and I received letters from readers who found solace and inspiration in its pages. But success didn't change who I was at my core. I still found the greatest joy in the simple moments, painting in my studio, sharing quiet evenings with Liam, and mentoring young artists at the community center. My life was a blend of the extraordinary and the ordinary, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. One morning, as I sipped coffee on the balcony, Liam joined me with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," he said, taking a seat beside me. "What if we opened a studio together?" I tilted my head, intrigued. "A studio?" "Ah," he said, his eyes lighting up. "A space where you can teach, where I can design, and where we can create something that brings people together. A place that's ours." The idea sent a thrill through me. The thought of building something tangible, something that combined our passions, felt like the perfect next step. "I love it," I said, leaning in to kiss him. "Let's do it." The studio, which we named Haven, became a hub for creativity and community. It was a place where artists of all levels could come to learn, collaborate, and find inspiration. Liam designed the space with his signature blend of elegance and functionality, while I filled it with vibrant colors and welcoming energy. Haven quickly became more than just a studio. It was a reflection of the life we had built together. And every time I walked through its doors, I was reminded of the journey that had brought me here. Years later, as I stood in the studio watching a group of young artists work on their projects, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. My life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was honest, it was full, and it was mine. And as I picked up a brush to join them, I smiled, knowing that the best stories are the ones still being written. The opening of Haven marked a new chapter not just for Liam and me, but for the community we had created. The studio quickly became a sanctuary for aspiring artists, seasoned creatives, and anyone seeking a space to explore their passions. Liam and I poured our hearts into the space, blending. Every inch of Haven told a story. The main gallery featured rotating exhibitions of work from local artists, while the smaller classrooms buzzed with activity during workshops and lessons. We hosted events, community art nights, and even open mic evenings where people could share poetry, music, or stories. It wasn't just a studio, it was a One day, as I was preparing for an upcoming class, Mia, one of the first mentees I had taken under my wing, approached me with a shy smile. "Rachel, can I show you something?" she asked, holding a small canvas wrapped in brown paper. "Of course," I said, setting down my supplies. She unwrapped the canvas to reveal a stunning painting, a blend of abstract shapes and colors that seemed to radiate emotion. It was raw, powerful, and deeply moving. "Mia, this is incredible," I said, my voice full of admiration. "You've really captured something here." She blushed, her eyes glistening. "I wanted to thank you. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and that made all the difference." Her words hit me deeply, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Mia, you've always had this talent. I just helped you see it." As she hugged me, I realized how much mentoring others had enriched my life. Mia wasn't just a student. She was a reminder of the power of resilience and the importance of giving back. That evening, Liam and I sat on the balcony of our home, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. It had become our tradition to end the day here, reflecting on the little moments that made life meaningful. "Mia showed me one of her paintings today," I said, resting my head on his shoulder. "It was beautiful. She's come so far." "He has a good mentor," Liam said, squeezing my hand, "and a great example of what it means to overcome." I smiled, grateful for his constant support. "You know, when I think about everything that's happened, Mark, Adrian, the mistakes I made, it's hard to believe I've ended up here. Sometimes it feels like a different life." Liam kissed the top of my head. "That's because you chose to grow. You didn't let your mistakes define you, Rachel. You turned them into something beautiful." His words stayed with me long after we went to bed. They reminded me of how far I had come, not just in rebuilding my life, but in rediscovering who I was. One afternoon, while Liam was away on a project, I received an unexpected visitor at the studio. It was Claire, Mark's wife. I hadn't seen her since the day I spotted them together in the park years ago, and her presence caught me off guard. "Hi, Rachel," she said, offering a polite smile. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," I said, gesturing for her to sit. "What brings you here?" She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I saw the article about Haven in the paper, and I wanted to come see it for myself. It's amazing." "Thank you," I said, unsure of what else to say. Claire's expression softened. "I also wanted to say something I've been meaning to for a while. Thank you." I blinked, confused. "For what?" "For being honest with Mark," she said. "It wasn't easy for him what happened between you two, but in a way, it forced him to confront things he had been avoiding. And that's what allowed us to build the life we have now." Her words were unexpected, but they filled me with a strange sense of relief. I had carried guilt for so long, and hearing that something good had come out of the pain brought a measure of closure. "I'm glad he's happy," I said, meaning every word. "He deserves that." "So do you," Claire replied, her smile genuine. "And it looks like you found it." As she left, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The past no longer felt like a weight. It was simply part of the story, one that had brought me to this moment. In the years that followed, Haven became more than I ever dreamed it could be. We expanded the studio to include a second location in a neighboring city, and the community continued to grow. Liam and I traveled often, finding inspiration in new places and cultures, and each journey added depth to our work. One evening, as we prepared for our anniversary dinner, Liam handed me a small envelope. Inside was a hand-drawn sketch of a home, a beautiful, sprawling house surrounded by trees with large windows and an outdoor studio space. "What's this?" I asked, holding up the sketch. "Our future," Liam said with a grin. "I've been designing it for us, a place where we can live, create, and maybe even start a family." Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at him. It's perfect. The house was completed a year later, and it became the heart of our lives. Nestled in a quiet, wooded area, it was a haven in every sense of the word. The studio overlooked a small lake, and I often found myself painting there, inspired by the beauty around me. Liam and I continued to grow together, our love deepening with each passing year, and though life wasn't without its challenges, we faced them with a sense of unity and purpose that made even the hard moments bearable. One sunny afternoon, as I sat by the lake sketching, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The mistakes, the heartbreak, the lessons. They had all shaped me, carving out space for the life I now lived. I had found peace not by erasing the past, but by embracing it, by using it. And as I watched the sunlight dance on the water, I smiled, knowing that my story was far from over. "What kind of inspiration?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He pulled out a small, folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to me. Inside was a hand-drawn sketch of a nursery, complete with a crib, a rocking chair, and shelves filled with books. My breath caught as I looked up at him, tears already forming. "Are you saying—" He grinned. "I think we're ready to start our next masterpiece." The journey to parenthood was both terrifying and exhilarating. When our daughter Lily was born, she brought with her a light that filled every corner of our lives. Watching her grow was like watching a blank canvas come to life, each moment adding new colors and textures to the masterpiece. Lily grew up surrounded by creativity and love, her laughter echoing through the halls of our home and studio. She spent her days painting beside me, building forts with Liam and exploring the world with a curiosity that reminded me of my younger self. Years later, as Lily prepared for her first art exhibit, a showcase of her childhood paintings, I found myself reflecting on the twists and turns that had led us here, the mistakes, the heartbreak, the moments of doubt. They had all been stepping stones, guiding me toward a life I could never have imagined. The exhibit, as I watched Lily speak confidently to a small crowd about her work, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Not just in her, but in the journey we had all taken to reach this point. "She's incredible," Liam said, standing beside me, "just like her mom." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "She's the best thing we've ever created." In the quiet moments that followed, as the exhibit wound down and the gallery emptied, I stood before one of Lily's paintings, a swirling mix of colors that felt both familiar and new. It reminded me of my first piece, the one that had started my journey so many years ago. Lily joined me, her small hand slipping into mine. "What do you think?" she asked, her voice filled with both excitement and nerves. "It's perfect," I said, my voice steady with emotion. "Just like you." And as we stood there, surrounded by the beauty of her work and the life we had built together, I knew that my story, our story, was far from over. It was still being written, one brushstroke, one choice, and one moment of love at a time.